seek first to understand, then to be understood. See, this habit is one of empathetic communication. This habit is crucial. No one is seeking to understand. They're seeking to be understood that their point is right. You can have a stance, you should have a stance, but you also have to have the position and posture and humility that you could be wrong. It's not about who is right. It's about what is right. So many of us are listening to respond because you're trying to be understood, not listening to really truly listen. This is what you need to do in all relationships across your world, your life. Ask questions, be curious. Get your effing face out of your phone. Communication is one of the most powerful traits you can have as a human being. It's a message that everyone in America needs to hear right now. Empathetic communication is the key to solving a lot of issues. Let's talk about the things we're told not to talk about so that we have an understanding of those things, politics, religion, and anything else contentious you want to throw in there. And I want you to really think about that. Seek first to understand, then be understood. Welcome back to Spartan Leadership. I'm your host, Josh Kosnick. Hey, and if this is your first time listening, this is going to be an interesting show because it's just me. Most of the time when you tune in, you have me interviewing or having a conversation, what I call leader-to-leader conversations, trying to bring you as much high impact as possible. Once a month, I bring you Leadership in Review, where myself, a good friend, Emmanuel Whitfield, is always with me, and sometimes we have some other special guests with us to assess contentious topics in our society, usually around the politics side because we're seeing such a lack of leadership from our political elites. Today, you are going to get just me. Sometimes I feel inspired to just get on the microphone and speak to you all, and today is one of those days. Topic today is habit number 5. And if you don't know what I'm talking about with habits, Stephen Covey, the late great Stephen Covey, wrote a great book called The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. If you have not read this book, I've referenced it often in the podcast over the years. And I also reference it in my individual and group coaching that I do often as well, because it's one of the classics. I rank it in the top 3 all-time of personal development books. My top book of all time is Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. And coincidentally, or maybe not so coincidentally, both of those books took over 20 years to compile into the great resource that they are today. Think about that, 20 years of research and writing to compile such phenomenal literatures and tools for us to grow as human beings and implement into our lives. So what is habit number 5? Habit number 5 is seek first to understand, then to be understood. And I want you to really think about that. Seek first to understand, then be understood. Now I want you to think about all the conversations you have on a daily basis. What percentage of the time would you say you're actually seeking to understand someone else's point of view, before you seek to be understood? See, this habit is one of empathetic communication. This habit is crucial. Now, you know what's interesting? As I was putting this together, I was thinking, today's going to be not only a leadership conversation, it's also going to be a leadership and review conversation. We're going to get a little political, and we're going to get a little deep into our society and communication styles interpersonally with this topic. And here's what I mean on the political side of things, or perhaps the society side of things. I think it was weaponized this topic of not talking about politics or religion. How many of you have heard, yeah, we shouldn't talk about politics or religion, whether it be in your family, whether it be in the workplace, whether it be in friendships? I certainly have, many times. Oh, by the way, if you're watching on video, I do have a cigar with me today. It's a King Power by Opus X. You know, Opus X is one of my favorite brands. So I always have to shout that out. Sorry for the brief interruption for those on audio, but I do have to call out what I'm smoking today for anyone that's watching on video. So back to the topic at hand. Again, how many of you have heard not to talk about politics or religion? I would guess almost every one of you. Have you ever thought, though, that that might be a tool for us to avoid talking about stuff that actually matters? Have you ever thought that might be weaponized against us? Something to think about, because I know we've all heard that topic. Let's think about that conversely. What if we were taught through school, through conversations around the dinner table, through conversations at Thanksgiving with periphery relatives? What if we were taught civil conversation? What if we were taught habit number 5? Seek first to understand, then to be understood. I think that's a much better way to teach our kids, and frankly, all of us as adults, to unlearn not talking about politics and religion. Because you know what it's led to? It's led to not understanding politics and religion by the vast majority of our society. It's unreal how little people know about political science. It's unreal how many people don't know that we actually don't live in a democracy, even though our political overlords keep saying Donald Trump's going to ruin our democracy, or some stupid line like that. We live in a constitutional republic. Again, take a poli-sci class, pick up a book, understand how our Constitution was written and why it was written. And by the way, hop into a cigar lounge with me sometime, if that's your thing. Because in cigar lounges, we're having conversations about politics, religion, about family, about the core family unit, about anything possible across the board, with people of all socioeconomic classes, with people of all religions, with people of all skin colors. And it's amazing what happens. Over an hour, hour and a half smoking a cigar, we get up and we're still friends. Now you imagine the comment sections online, whether it be Facebook, whether it be a news article, there's nothing but hate. No one is seeking to understand. They're seeking to be understood, that their point is right. I want to introduce you to a quote that I utilize often, especially when I'm doing EOS implementations and helping leadership teams implement tools and leadership conversations and addressing issues at their root cause versus symptoms. But I introduced this phrase, and I think it's appropriate not only for this conversation, but for all of your lives, whether it's in a heated conversation with your wife, we won't even say argument, or husband, whether it's with your kids, whether it's with your work colleagues, whether it's with your business partners. Here's the quote I want you to remember. It's not about who is right. It's about what is right. What is right for the business? What is right for the family? Now, y'all may have a different opinion on what is right, but what we're trying to embrace in that is getting out of your ego and focusing on what is the right solution for the problem at hand. And here's the other thing when I think about politics and religion not being talked about. You know, on the very first night my wife and I met, my now wife and I, the first night we met, she asked me about religion. She asked me what side of the aisle I was on politics-wise. At that time in 2006, 2007, whatever it was, I was on the Republican side. She grew up in conservative rural Indiana, so she was as well. I moved to the independent / more libertarian side, if you had to label me, which I don't like identifying with any of the parties or anything right now. But I moved to that after going to Washington, D.C. for 6 years and watching these people lie to my face. I learned a lot about our political process and who's actually running DC. So when I speak about these things in Leadership and Review, I have a deep knowledge. And I would encourage you all to have that deep knowledge as well, so we don't get screwed over as a country by these people lying to our faces. But I digress. The point I bring up with my wife asking me about those questions the very first night we were able to hang out, she didn't hide from those conversations. She knew where she stood. I knew where I stood. And we were able to have a good conversation about different things. Now, yes, we had stuff in common at that time, being on the right side of the aisle. Yes, we had stuff in common, being both believers in Christ. But there's stuff we disagreed with too. There was stuff she helped me understand over time, especially about religion and God and faith, that really helped form who I am today. And I know there's stuff that I've helped her learn that have helped form who she is today. But if we weren't willing to go there, like I have friends, and I know many of you probably do as well, that say the guy is a staunch conservative and the wife is a bleeding heart liberal. And it's crazy. I'll ask him, because a friend of mine, I said, how do you guys coexist in this environment? And he says, we just don't talk about it. They just don't talk about it. Now keep in mind, they have kids. So is the loudest parent going to win in what the kids believe? By just not talking about it? And again, by just not talking about it, what are we learning about each other? What are we learning about someone else's point of view? We don't. And in fact, us as human beings crave intellectual stimuli. One of the best ways to get intellectual stimulus is by having a deep conversation that leads to learning. One of my favorite new quotes, and I don't even know who said it, so I'm going to claim it as mine today, is argue like you are right, but listen with the notion that you could be wrong or that you are wrong. So that's the art of listening, right? You can have a stance. You should have a stance. But you also have to have the position and posture and humility that you could be wrong. Upon further reflection, upon further information, that you could be wrong. Right? My stance right now, just as an example, is that I think that 90 plus percent of the politicians in Washington, D.C. are corrupt as all hell, and they're out to screw us over and turn us into a communist nation. I also state that with the posture that I could be wrong, but dang, there's a lot of proof right now that's showing me that I'm right. But I sit here with the posture that says I could be wrong. And I have that stance, and you guys have heard me talk about some of that stance through Leadership and Review podcasts. I think we're in a dangerous time right now, with the media being controlled by our government and Hollywood being controlled by our government, and how much influence they have over the sheeple of this nation. I think more and more people are waking up, but we got to wake up faster before we're all enslaved, not only monetarily, but every other way as well. So here's the other piece of this. We've also been used against us, the silent majority. I know every single one of you have heard that term. And they go kind of hand in hand. The silent majority, to not stand up for what you believe in, to be quiet, essentially. The loudest is actually the fringe, right? Either the fringe right or the fringe left. Right now, it's really the fringe left because the media really pays attention to them. That's like 1% of people, probably not even that are causing a lot of noise. And then you got this huge chunk of people in the middle that really aren't saying anything, that are afraid to speak up because you'll be called a name. How weak are you? Now, trust me, I've been called lots of names. And when I grew up, I heard the phrase often, actually even by my father, sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt me. My father would always say, don't take offense. Those words can't hurt you. Did they hurt? Emotionally, possibly. But as you get resilient, as you hear them enough, like whatever it may be that someone called you, you realize their opinion doesn't weigh anything on you. So why are you so afraid to speak up? Why are you so afraid to talk politics or religion with those that you love? To engage, to seek first to understand, then to be understood. It's empathetic communication. So many of us are listening to respond because you're trying to be understood. You're not listening to really truly listen, to understand where they're coming from. And by the way, when you're listening to respond, you're not paying attention to their body language. You're not paying attention to their nonverbal cues. They give you so much information about what they're truly trying to say to you. I've been blessed to be in sales the vast majority of my life since I was 16 years old. My first job at Circuit City selling cell phones and beepers. That ages me because some of you listening to this may not even know what a pager or beeper is. But that's what I started my sales career in. You learn nonverbal cues to pay attention to posture and nonverbal cues, body language, what's not being said behind the words that they're saying. Asking questions, being curious. This is what you need to do in all relationships across your world, your life. Ask questions, be curious. Get your effing face out of your phone. Communication is one of the most powerful traits you can have as a human being. And it's becoming a lost art because our faces are constantly buried in a screen. You want to teach your kids something powerful. Teach them how to communicate, how to look in the eyes, how to read body language, how to be empathetic, and to seek to understand before being understood. Know what you stand for, but also understand that you could be wrong. When you open yourself up to that possibility, you open yourself up to learning. Knowledge is power. Learning is good. And also unlearning some of the bad stuff that we had really conditioned into us growing up, whether it be from our parents, to our teachers, to any other mentors or friends that we had. There's so many things we hang on to that we don't need to hang on to. And through prayer and through conversation and learning and being around great people, people that you look up to, people that you want to emulate, people that are successful, not just with money, but successful in life, as a parent, as a spouse, as a philanthropist, whatever it is that you look up to. Get around those people. Have them teach you what they know that you don't. We're either green or growing or ripe and rotting. There is no staying the same. This is like a nursery rhyme my father taught me. There is no staying the same. So, if you're not learning, if you're not engaging in these conversations, if you're not constantly looking to evolve your thinking, you're dying on the vine, slowly but surely. You may not see it on a daily basis, but you'll see it over the years. I want to be that 90-year-old that's constantly learning, that's still working out, that's still learning, that's still having deep, meaningful conversations with all sorts of people. And at that elderly age, I can be, that's twice my age now, over twice, just so we're clear. But twice my age now, where I can impart wisdom to younger generations to make sure that they are living a more joyful, fulfilled life. And that's what I want to do with these podcasts as well. I want to continue this going. I haven't even thought about this, but that's a great idea for me right now just to think about it. Think about if I had this podcast. I started this podcast, I think, right around the age 40, maybe 39. If I had the podcast running for 50 years, how much wisdom, how much tape. And then to go back and think about at age 40 what I was saying on the podcast versus age 90, how much my thinking evolved. I'm just thinking this out with you guys right now. That's pretty awesome. Maybe that even inspires you to start a podcast right now, whatever age you are. It's a really cool thought to think about. You should be evolving. I should be getting better behind the microphone. I should be getting better with questions. I should be better with production to make sure that the impact that I intend to have is landing with all of you. So today I want to keep this brief, but I want to be very, very powerful with it. Habit number 5, seek first to understand, then to be understood. Thank you, Stephen Covey, for these great words of wisdom. Again, if you have not read the book, please get it. And this is one of the best things I think I've ever been told by a long-term coach and mentor of mine. He was a mentor all my life, but a coach in a formal setting for 15 years, John Wright Sr. And he said, don't just read a book, study it. You should have highlights. You should have underlines. You should have notes. You should have bunny ears. If you don't know what bunny ears is, just folding the page at the corner. All of that. And then reread the book. The great books like Think and Grow Rich, like 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. Atomic Habits is becoming that book for our generation. The books that really resonate with you, that you are putting notes in, the great ones, study them. They are jewels. They were meant for impact. And then go teach it so you learn it twice. But by and large today, I want you to take from this conversation, from these words, that not talking about politics, not talking about religion, or anything else contentious is a weapon against us. It's been weaponized by the elite to force us into not having crucial conversations with each other that evolve our learning, that evolve our thinking, and that lead to understanding of what politics and religion actually mean in our society. Removing God from our schools was one of the worst things that's ever happened. I will go on record on saying that. With the posture that I could be wrong, but I don't think I am. Because what we did is we removed not only God, but a moral standing. Now we leave it to flawed humans for whatever is morally right. And as we see in our schools right now, where we got books of teaching young kids, not just high school kids, but young kids, how to give fellatio, how to do all these sexual acts, how to go trans, how to do all this different stuff that shouldn't even be in a kid's mind yet. One of the biggest blessings my father-in-law ever taught me was keep your kids as innocent as possible, as long as possible. These books, removing God from our school system, and some of these warped, fucked up in the head teachers are ruining our kids' innocence. And because we're not willing to talk about politics or religion or anything else contentious, we're allowing this bullshit to happen. So it's time for you to get off the couch, go to a frickin' PTA meeting, go to a school board meeting, and get these idiots out of your kid's school. If I have to hear another parent complain because they're sending their kid to a public school where they got litter boxes because a kid thinks they're a furry, which, by the way, is a sexual fetish, not an actual gender or not a human being, that if you want to be a furry, that's for the bedroom, not for your kids, and not for us to comply with having a litter box in a frickin' public school. Because we're not talking about politics, because we're not talking about religion, because you want to save face or not offend anyone because everyone's feelings are too fragile, this is the very reason we're in the state with our school system the way it is. We need God back in the schools. And it doesn't have to be in a way where we're preaching religion. That's not what I'm saying. It's for the morality of the sake of our kids. It's right and wrong. Talking about what's right and wrong. And learning from each other. Spartans, please share this episode far and wide. It's a message that everyone in America needs to hear right now. Communication, empathetic communication, is the key to solving a lot of issues. Think about if our politicians, which again, I know they're corrupt, and I think they're doing mostly theatrics, but think about if our politicians did it like the old politicians from 100 years ago, where they sought to understand each other from across the aisle and came up with bipartisan bills, not fake ones like they're pretending to do now when they got one person on the other side of the aisle voting for something, but actual bipartisan bills where they actually came to the middle for the betterment of the American people. Think about if they actually practiced seek first to understand, then to be understood. What a great country we'd get back. But it starts in your homes. It starts in your communities. One of my favorite quotes from one of my great mentors, Andy Frisella, personal excellence is the ultimate rebellion. Let's practice personal excellence in communication with each other. Let's talk about the things we're told not to talk about so that we have an understanding of those things, politics, religion, and anything else contentious you want to throw in there. Empathetic communication. Seek first to understand, then to be understood. Remember, Spartans, the good and great are the enemies of possible. Lead like a Spartan today.